All right, now that we know a little bit more about, um, how to resize or set up a document in Photoshop or resize a raster image, let's talk a little about building a composition, okay? Eventually, we're going to learn a more sophisticated way, but for now, we're just going to start with kind of the basics. I got this document here in Photoshop. It's like a 900 by 900. And I want to bring in some additional photos. Okay, these are additional like raster photos. Actually, that's your homework. Well, we got this bad boy. Okay. I want to bring in some of these images here. We'll even like download a couple. Bring them in. And the easiest, and I want to combine more than one because normally if I open up, say, a JPEG and then I open up another raster image, it actually opens up each individually, like separate documents. But what I'm really trying to do is to sort of build one composition with them. So what I'm actually going to do is go to File, and I'm going to go to Place Embedded. Okay, Place lets you bring in an image or some sort of design. So I'm going to click on Bear. And then there's my bear. Okay. And you'll notice I got these little widgets here that let me resize this. I could even put my cursor a little beyond and rotate if I wanted to do that. And when I'm done, I'm just going to hit return or enter. Okay. If I were to click on this with the move tool, I could move my image around. Okay. Let's try that with another photo. I'm going to go to File. Oops, let me hit return or enter. And I'm going to go to Place Embedded again. So this is File, Place Embedded. And let's grab the sunset one. Okay, so once again, it brings in my composition and I can resize this. And I can rotate this. Okay. Let's even bring in our own. So let's go to Pexels or something. I've kept using Pexels. Let's try a different one. Let's use Unsplash. It's another good place for royalty free and I don't know. Flowers. All right. This one's kind of pretty. Let's go to download. Oh, whoops. Have they switched? Oh, okay. I haven't been here in a while. Let's go to free. That way we're using free ones. Let's click download. Okay, there we go. I downloaded the photo. Should have gone to wherever my downloads are, which is my downloads folder here. There's the pretty picture of flowers. It says lilac. I'm bad with photos. And I'm going to go to File and Place Embedded. And I'm going to grab under Downloads the file, which is right here. All right, there you go. Okay. Now I want to go through a couple of things here. Let's talk about layers, okay? How your items are being stacked. Do I actually have a more specific one? Yeah, actually this will, well, okay, I'm going to jump ahead and we'll talk about, and then we'll come back to this one. So let's actually talk about the concept of layers, okay? Now, Adobe Photoshop is pretty much considered by most people to be sort of the industry standard when it comes to raster editing graphics. And it wasn't the first photo editor there's been other programs before that. But the reason why it became so popular is it was one of the first to introduce the concept of layers. And what layers really allow you to do is sort of take a composition and divide it into different sections. And by having different sections, you could kind of, have a little bit more control over how you manipulated things. This is exercise 11, and this is my layer stack. If you don't have your layer stack open in Photoshop, you can go under Window and then go down to Layers to open it up, or in older ones, it's keyboard F7 if you have a function, button on your keyboard there. And this is my setup. And what you have to understand about layers is layers stack up, okay? Like dominoes, or think of it as like sandwiches. It's like bread, meat, lettuce, cheese, bread, whatever. So it's like, okay, my base, this pastel is my background. Okay, that's at the bottom. Then I'm going to add something on top of that. That's this little blue shape here. And if I want to use the move tool, I can move it around. Oops, why am I not? There you go. Okay. If you're having trouble, you might want to make sure auto select is turned on there. Uh, on top of that is this elephant, which if I grab, I can move the elephant around. On top of that is this flower. So it's like if something is on top of something else, if it will block the item underneath it. So obviously, if I put the flower here, I'm blocking part of the elephant. I'm also blocking part of the blue shape. If something isn't takes up the entire layer, like this blue pastel, you can actually reorder your stack here. So at any point, I can change the stack order. So if I wanted this on top, I can highlight this layer and literally drag it. And you might notice that sort of blue line that's occurring there. That's showing you my new stack order. So right now it's like, okay, the blue's on top, or maybe I want to put the elephant on top, or maybe I want to put this pastel on top. And if I do that, since this pastel takes up the entire space, it blocks everything else. Okay. So you can reorder layers. You can also turn a layer on and off with this little thing here. This is called a visibility toggle. Looks like a little eye icon. And like it sounds like, it lets you turn off the visibility of something. So if you wanted to see what your composition would look like without a certain element in it, like maybe I want to see what my composition looks like without the elephant in it, or maybe without the green flower, I can do that. Okay. To get it back on, just click on the little empty box and it should turn the visibility back on. If you want to lock a layer, you can click on the little lock icon. I'm not going to go through all the various locks, but we're just going to click the one on the far right called Lock All Attributes. That puts a little lock icon, and that means that particular layer is locked, which means I cannot move it, resize it, rescale it. So you'll notice if I try to highlight the elephant, I can't select it. But all the other layers, which are not locked, I could select. Unlock a layer, simply click on the lock or, click on the layer itself, turn off the little lock icon, that should disappear, and then it goes back to being editable. Um, you may want to make your own layer. You can do that by in your layers tab at the very bottom. Second from the right, there's this thing that looks like a little plus sign there. This allows you to make a new layer. So if I click on it, it makes a brand new layer that's blank. In this case, it's called layer one. So if you want to rename it, you can just click on it, give it a name, my new layer, and hit return. Okay. This new layer, I could either copy and paste something into it, or I could draw into it using various drawing tools that Photoshop has. I'm not going to get into that right now, but you could. You can also delete layers in Photoshop. It's very simple. Simply highlight the layer. At the very bottom of your layer stack, this thing that kind of looks like a little trash icon. It's very similar to the trash icon or the recycling bin on, like a Mac operating system or a Windows operating system, except instead of deleting a file, it deletes a layer. So if I click on this, I can delete the whole layer. Another way to do this, if you don't want to use the icon, is to go under Layer, Delete Layer. You can also, by the way, duplicate layers, which means, you take a layer and make a copy of that. Why would you want to do that? Well, we've talked before about this idea of working non-destructively, which is the idea that we don't want to delete or remove content unless you absolutely have to. So how do we do that? Well, what you could do is simply, if you're gonna do something that's probably gonna dramatically affect your composition, you could duplicate it. And the way you could do that is by going under Layer, Duplicate Layer. And if you click on that, I'm gonna call this Duplicate Elephant. I'm going to hit OK. By the way, this is saying where do you want to put this new layer? You can even put it in an additional file if you want to do that, but I actually want to keep it in this. I'm gonna hit OK, and then there's my duplicate. Okay. You can also do Command or Control J as a keyboard shortcut, or you can drag it to the new layer icon, and that would also make a duplicate really quickly for you. All right, so that's some basics of layers. So if we went back here, it's like you can see how, every time I placed a photo, it put it into my into my layer stack. Like I'll call this flowers. And I could turn these on and off. And if I wanted to reorder them, maybe I would drag that there, or, maybe I want the sunset on top. So you can always, move things around and, edit them and things like that. Change their, rewrite their names here. All right, let's talk about scaling part of your image or scaling a layer. So, like I said, layers allow you to sort of separate content from each other so that they're easier to work. So, for instance, I have this red woman drawing and I have this green woman drawing. And what I'm going to do is click on the red or make sure the red woman layer is selected. And I'm going to go to edit and I'm going to go to free transform. And what that's going to do is add little widgets to the corners here, these little white boxes. And this actually allows me to scale. Now, in newer versions of Photoshop, it's actually automatically going to scale both the width and the height. Other graphic design programs maybe won't do that, where they do both. Or if you have like an older version, if you only want to scale one or the other, you can actually hold down Shift. That's like the old school way. This is how it used to kind of work. But now in Photoshop, at least when you scale, it should scale in ratio to each other. I'm going to scale it up and I'm just going to hit the return or enter key. And so it did scale it. You will notice that the woman is very pixelated, right? She has some distortion. This is similar to when we blew up the image larger in that when you take a raster and you make it larger, what really happens is you change the number of pixels to have to increase more pixels. In other words, like, it used to take up 100 pixels, now it takes up, I don't know, 300 pixels or whatever the new number is. So when you add pixels to when you add pixels to this, where do they come from? Do they magically fall out of the sky? And the answer is no. The only way to get those pixels is by copying the existing pixels. And when you just copy data, it doesn't end up looking very good. I'll even do a very simple analogy or a very simple situation here. So what I'm going to do is and don't worry exactly how I'm doing this. I'm going to draw one green pixel. Okay. Don't worry about, actually make sure it's on the right layer here. One green pixel. Okay. And I'm going to blow her up. And when I blow her up and let's zoom back in where the green pixel was. See how it was 1 pixel and now it's like, 9 or about 16. So it's like it just had to copy it over and over. And it's like the quality just doesn't look very, and that's, imagine every single pixel here was the same thing. You know what I mean? That's why this doesn't work out. So when you blow something up as a raster graphic, it's always going to look a little bit distorted. The larger the scaling percentage, the more it's going to look distorted. There's really no way around it. There's like tricks you can do, and AI can help a little bit and all that kind of stuff. But at its core, it's like that's what happens. I'm gonna click on the green woman. Let's go to free transforms, edit free transform. And I'm gonna scale her down. Okay. And if I look at this at 100%, it actually looks fine. And this is like when I scaled a large image down smaller. When you scale something down in a raster editing program like Photoshop or Photopea or Clip Studio Pro or whatever it is, it's like you're basically throwing out pixels, okay? And it's okay to throw out pixels. That doesn't result in any problems. So let's try doing that same scenario. I'm gonna like put one red pixel here in the corner. And when I make this smaller, I zoom in. It's like, you know, oops, I didn't mean to do that. See how it's like it almost basically had to remove it. I mean, it's technically there. It like kind of, made it kind of this mixture between the red and the green to get that kind of off green, but it's like it basically kind of removed it. And that's really what happens when you shrink. It like finds a way to like remove excess data, put in like a slightly new piece of data, but it's like it's much easier. So the point of what I'm trying to say here, I'm not saying it very well. Do as I say, not as I say. What you want to do is, in general, you don't want to blow up a raster graphic larger than its normal size, if possible. It's okay to take a larger graphic and shrink it down. So what that might mean is if I were working in something like here, it's like, okay, I don't think this particular site isn't very good about sizing, where it doesn't let you pick a certain size. But here it's like, okay, let's say I wanted to use this photo. Um, I can choose a specific size. Now, I don't necessarily need a huge, but maybe I might grab it a little bigger than what I need because I'm not sure how much of it I'm going to use. And then if I bring that into my document, so if I don't know, let's do a file place embedded, and I'm gonna bring in the image here. This is actually already resizing it, but you'll notice that it's like if I bring this smaller, it still looks nice and crisp. Whereas if this had started small, this actually is the embed is actually forcing it smaller than it probably would have been normally. Um, But it's like, if I blew this up, this is when you start to get sort of, distortion and things like that. Anyway, just pointing that out there. All right, last thing, and then actually two more things. All right, so in addition to scaling a raster, you can also rotate them using the free transform. So I have two arrows here, a red arrow and a purple arrow. And they're actually the same size. I'm just gonna so keep I'm just going to rotate this. So what I'm going to do is go to File, and I'm going to go, sorry, Edit, Free Transform, or Command or Control T. And then if I put my cursor just a little bit beyond the edges here, this is where I can rotate. That number that's actually showing up in black, that's actually the amount of degrees I'm rotating. Okay. So note that when you rotate, it rotates in increment, it's a circle. So 0 is like the default, 90 is a quarter turn, 180 is a half turn, 270 is a three quarters turn, and 360 would be a full turn, kind of like in skiing or skateboarding tricks and all that. So if I come into here and I rotate this, it's 45 degrees from its start point. All right. So if I hit return or enter, I have now rotated this. Okay. In newer versions, you might get this contextual menu where you can actually flip it or rotate it. Looks like you can rotate it 90 degrees. If you want to be very precise, I recommend going to the Properties panel. And when you highlight something, under the transform area here, there's a W and H, or a width and a height. This allows you to set a width and a height. So if I were to set this to 200, it's going to scale that up to be exactly, to stay in line. So this becomes 207. If I wanted it smaller, I could make it like 100, make it smaller. There's also this rotation here, so I could rotate it. I'm using the preset here, but I could be very exact if I wanted it exactly 31 degrees for some reason. I could do that. Okay. So if you want to be a little bit more precise for some reason, You could use the properties panel and use like the width and height and the rotation method there. All right, last thing. We're just going to go through the very basics of using type. If I'm being honest, I could do an entire class on type and about the basics of typography and all that sort of stuff. But so I'm not going to get super deep, but essentially what I can do is I'm going to come in here and about 4/5 down, there's this little T for text. And if what I could do is if I click on my canvas, I can write text. Now it's going to put in some dummy text, as we call it in graphic design, lorem ipsum. Lorem ipsum is default standardized. It's just some dummy text so you can see what it looks like. You can get rid of it by literally hitting delete and just typing whatever you want. I am a cat. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is highlight. If you want to make any changes to your text, you need to highlight. And then some of the basic stuff is up here. So if you want to use a different typeface, this is your list of typefaces. It's based on the typefaces installed on your computer. So we'll talk more about this in the future. We'll do this in context of After Effects, but it's all basically the same, where it's like if you want to work with a particular typeface, it has to be installed on your computer, on your operating system, the Mac operating system, OS X, or Windows if you're working with a PC. So I'm just choosing a different typeface here. Some typefaces have different versions or family members, as we would say. So I could do light or bold. This is the color. So it's set to red right now. I'm going to make it darker, make it black. This is my font size. Text, at least on a computer, is usually measured one of two ways, either in pixels or points. A point is an old school method of setting up size of type. The way it works is 1 inch is equal to, no, it is equal to 2.4 centimeters, but that's not what I was trying to do. 72 points. Okay. You've actually probably been measuring type in points your whole life. You probably just didn't know that. When you open up Microsoft Word, and you set your text to 12. That's actually 12 points usually. Some programs that might be 12 pixels. It kind of depends. So what does that really mean? Well, what that really means is do out the math. If your text is set to 12 points, if there's 72 points in an inch, 12 divided by 72 is 0.166 inches tall. So once again, what does that mean? Well, what it really means, I don't think this is actually set to 12, but if I were to take this text and measure from the bottom of the text to the top of the text with a ruler, because we got that kind of time there, that would be 1/6 of an inch tall. Okay. So at this point, you don't have to really worry about that because we're not measuring, we're not doing finite, but So anyway, you can see when I change the number of points, it does increase or decrease the amount of text here. You can move around the text using the Move tool. Same thing we use to move around images in the file place. Notice also that when you add text, Photoshop at least will make a special layer for that text called a text layer, where you can literally see it being written out. I am a cat. It also has you can tell something is a text layer in Photoshop because there's a big old T on it, T for text. Remember, just to note, if you want to edit your text, like change the size of it or the color, it has to be highlighted first. Ways of doing that is using the text tool and then literally clicking and dragging. Or another way to do this is if you double click, little insider tip here, is you double click on this one too, it automatically highlights the entire paragraph or words or whatever. And I could quickly switch to a different color or maybe a different typeface. You might notice that the text is actually going off of my document a little bit. So unlike, say, defaultly the way that like Microsoft Word or TextEdit works or Google Docs, text in Photoshop does not automatically wrap to the next line. There is a way to do that, though. The way to do that is what you need to do is before you even write your text, you have to create what's called a bounding box. The bounding box is the boundary that your text cannot go beyond. The way that you do this is if you literally click and drag. See, I'm forming like a little rectangle here. That rectangle is my bounding box. And then whatever I type, I am typing stuff here. It will go to the next line. Okay. So you can see that in this case, my text is wrapping. You can always resize your boundary box. The boundary box here can be resized kind of like using the free transform tool to be bigger or smaller, and that allows more or less text within the boundary box. Okay, that was a lot there. I know I talked a while, but try that out. That was exercise 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16, please. Okay.